The forest was alive with the symphony of nature, rustling leaves, chirping birds, and the distant gurgle of a brook. But amidst this serenity lay chaos. A man, bloodied and broken, struggled to crawl through the underbrush. His uniform was torn, his body battered from an ambush that had left him alone in enemy territory. He didn't know where he was or how long he'd been unconscious. All he knew was pain and survival. His name was Callan Drake, a soldier who had seen too many battles but never one like this. The air felt different here, heavier somehow, as though the atmosphere itself carried secrets older than time. Trees loomed unnaturally tall, their trunks glowing faintly with veins of luminescent blue. It wasn't Earth anymore, he was sure of it. Whether by accident or design, something had brought him here, a place both beautiful and terrifying. Callan's vision blurred as exhaustion clawed at him. His hand reached out for support, only to grasp thin air. Gravity seemed determined to pull him down into the earth, where darkness promised relief. Just as his strength gave way, a sound cut through the haze, a soft crunch of leaves behind him. Instinct kicked in, forcing him to roll over despite the agony screaming through his limbs. There she stood. She was unlike anything Callan could have imagined. Tall, statuesque, and radiating power, she looked like she belonged on some ancient battlefield painted across the stars. Her skin shimmered faintly, catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. Long, silver-white hair cascaded down her back like liquid moonlight, framing sharp features that spoke of grace and danger in equal measure. She wore armor made of material Callan couldn't identify, smooth yet impossibly strong, etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with a subtle energy. In her hand rested a weapon that defied logic, sleek, organic-looking, and humming softly, as if alive. For a moment, neither moved. Callan's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Was she real? Or was this delirium playing tricks on him? She tilted her head slightly, studying him with piercing golden eyes that seemed to see straight through him. There was no malice in her gaze, just curiosity, and perhaps a flicker of pity. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally, her voice low and melodic, carrying a strange accent that made each word feel deliberate, almost musical. Callan blinked, stunned not just by her appearance but by the fact that she spoke his language. "Where am I?" he managed, his voice hoarse from disuse. Her lips curved into the slightest hint of a smile, though it held more intrigue than warmth. "A world you weren't meant to find." She crouched beside him, her movements fluid and precise, like those of a predator assessing its prey. "You're injured." It wasn't a question, but Callan nodded anyway. Pain flared anew as she gently prodded his side, her touch surprisingly gentle despite her warrior's demeanor. He winced, biting back a groan. Whatever injuries he'd sustained during the crash, or whatever had happened, they were severe enough to leave him incapacitated. "I can help you," she said after a pause, her tone matter-of-fact. "But you'll owe me." Callan frowned, suspicion mingling with desperation. "Owe you what?" Her golden eyes gleamed with amusement. "That depends. First, tell me your name." "Callan," he rasped. "Callan Drake." She repeated the name slowly, rolling it around as if testing its weight. "I am Silvara," she said, "Huntress of the Valerii." Before Callan could process the significance of her title, or ask what exactly the Valerii were, Silvara rose to her feet. With effortless strength, she scooped him up, cradling him against her chest. Despite himself, Callan felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with awe. This alien woman, who looked like she could take down an entire battalion without breaking a sweat, was carrying him like a child. As they moved deeper into the forest, Callan noticed things he hadn't before. The trees weren't just glowing, they were breathing, their bark expanding and contracting rhythmically. Strange creatures darted between the branches, some resembling animals he recognized, others utterly alien. And then there were the sounds, whispers, almost imperceptible, weaving through the air like ghostly echoes. "Are we safe?" Callan asked hesitantly, wincing as jolts of pain shot through him. Silvara glanced down at him, her expression unreadable. "No," she replied simply. "But safer than you were." Callan wasn't sure whether to take comfort in that or brace himself for whatever horrors awaited them next. One thing was certain. Wherever he was, whoever Silvara truly was, his life would never be the same again. The journey through the forest was surreal, almost dreamlike. Callan clung to consciousness, fighting the pull of darkness as Silvara navigated the labyrinthine woods with practiced ease. Every step she took seemed deliberate, calculated, as if she knew precisely where she was going, and why. Her presence was both reassuring and unsettling, a paradox wrapped in armor and mystery. As they walked, or rather, as she carried him, Callan found himself studying her more closely. Up close, her features were even more striking. Her golden eyes glimmered with intelligence, but also something deeper, harder to define. Confidence, resolve, or perhaps a quiet sadness buried beneath layers of stoicism. He wanted to ask about it, to pry open the enigma that was Silvara, but every attempt at conversation ended abruptly when pain overwhelmed him. At one point, she paused near a stream, setting him down gently on a patch of mossy ground. Kneeling beside him, she dipped her fingers into the water, which sparkled faintly under the filtered sunlight. Without warning, she pressed her wet fingertips to his forehead, murmuring something in a language he didn't understand. The sensation was strange, not unpleasant, but not entirely comforting either. It was as though the water carried a charge, tingling against his skin and spreading warmth through his veins. "What are you doing?" Callan croaked, his voice barely audible. "Healing you," Silvara replied curtly. "Or trying to. Your biology is complicated." Callan chuckled weakly, the irony of her words not lost on him. "Complicated? You're telling me?" She arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his attempt at humor. "Don't mistake my actions for kindness," she said sharply. "You're useful to me right now. That's all." Useful? Callan's mind reeled. What possible use could he be to someone like her? Before he could press further, Silvara stood abruptly, scanning the horizon with an intensity that suggested danger lurked nearby. Her weapon hummed louder now, vibrating faintly in her grip. Callan followed her gaze, squinting into the distance, but saw nothing except the endless expanse of glowing trees and shifting shadows. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "And stay behind me." Callan nodded mutely, adrenaline surging despite his weakened state. Whatever threat she sensed, it was clear she took it seriously. For the first time since meeting her, he felt genuinely afraid, not just of whatever might be lurking in the forest, but of Silvara herself. There was a ruthlessness to her, an edge that hinted at a lifetime spent hunting, surviving, killing. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a force of nature. Minutes passed in tense silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Then, without warning, movement erupted from the underbrush, a blur of claws and teeth hurtling toward them. Silvara reacted instantly, raising her weapon and firing a bolt of searing light that struck the creature mid-leap. It let out a guttural screech before collapsing mere feet away, revealing a grotesque amalgamation of feline and reptilian features. Its scales shimmered faintly, matching the luminescence of the trees around them. "That's new," Silvara muttered, lowering her weapon. "They're getting bolder." Callan stared at the dead creature, his heart pounding. "What was that?" "A predator," she said simply, stepping over the carcass. "One of many. This forest isn't kind to intruders." The casualness of her tone sent chills down Callan's spine. To her, this was routine, a minor inconvenience in a day filled with far greater dangers. To him, it was a glimpse into a world he barely understood, a world where survival depended on skills and instincts far beyond his own. As they resumed their trek, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The whispers in the air grew louder, more insistent, though Silvara showed no sign of hearing them. Her focus remained unwavering, her steps steady and sure. Yet beneath her calm exterior, Callan sensed a tension, an awareness of something unseen, something vast and ancient that lurked just beyond the edges of perception. Whatever it was, Callan realized, they weren't heading toward safety. They were walking straight into the heart of it. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the glowing trees, Silvara finally slowed her pace. She led Callan to a small clearing bathed in twilight hues, where the air seemed thicker, charged with an energy that prickled against his skin. At the center of the clearing stood a structure unlike anything he'd ever seen, a crystalline dome that pulsed faintly with iridescent light. It appeared alive, its surface rippling like water frozen in motion. "This is where we rest," Silvara announced, lowering Callan carefully onto the soft grass. "It will shield us from most threats." Callan stared at the dome, mesmerized. "What is it?" "A relic," she replied cryptically. "Older than my people. Older than yours." She knelt beside him, producing a small vial filled with a shimmering liquid. "Drink this. It will dull the pain." He hesitated, eyeing the vial warily. "Will it poison me?" Her lips twitched in what might have been a smirk. "If I wanted you dead, human, you'd already be so." Fair point, Callan thought grimly. He uncorked the vial and drank, wincing as the liquid burned its way down his throat. Almost immediately, warmth spread through his body, easing the sharp edges of his pain. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to let him think clearly again. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. "You said yourself I'm useful." "Useful for what?" Silvara settled cross-legged opposite him, her golden eyes glinting in the fading light. "You're a puzzle," she admitted. "Humans aren't supposed to exist here. Yet here you are, bleeding on my planet. Someone brought you here for a reason. And you don't know who?" "I suspect," she corrected. "But suspicions aren't facts." She leaned forward, her expression hardening. "Tell me, Callan Drake, why were you in that forest? Who sent you?" "No one," he snapped, irritation flaring. "I don't even know how I got here. One minute I was fighting in a war zone, the next, this." He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "Trust me, if I knew anything, I'd tell you. Anything to get out of this mess." To his surprise, Silvara laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "You think honesty buys trust? How quaint." Callan bristled. "You're one to talk. You haven't told me a damn thing about yourself." "Because knowledge is power," she shot back. "And you're not ready for mine." The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Callan opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, the dome shuddered violently. Both turned toward it, startled. The pulsing light dimmed momentarily, then flared brighter, illuminating the clearing in harsh, unnatural tones. "What's happening?" Callan demanded, pushing himself upright despite the protests of his battered body. Silvara rose swiftly, her weapon already in hand. "Something doesn't want us here." The ground trembled beneath their feet, accompanied by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very core of the planet. The whispers Callan had noticed earlier grew louder, coalescing into something resembling words, but not in any language he recognized. They echoed inside his skull, disjointed and chaotic, making his head throb. "Stay close," Silvara ordered, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the dome. "It won't last much longer." Inside the structure, the air was cool and still, offering a brief reprieve from the chaos outside. Callan sank to his knees, breathing heavily as Silvara paced the perimeter, her weapon trained on the entrance. The light within the dome flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows across her face. "You said this place would protect us," Callan accused, clutching his ribs. "It will," she replied tersely. "But protections have limits. And patience." Callan wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the effort required to form coherent thoughts was draining. Instead, he focused on staying conscious, on ignoring the persistent ache in his bones and the phantom voices whispering in his mind. Whatever force was shaking the forest, it wasn't done yet, and neither was Silvara. When dawn broke over the alien forest, the tremors subsided, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Silvara emerged cautiously from the protective dome, her weapon at the ready. Callan stumbled after her, leaning heavily on a makeshift staff she had fashioned from a fallen branch. His body protested every movement, but curiosity drove him forward. The landscape had changed overnight. Trees bent unnaturally, their glowing veins dimmed, and the once vivid colors of the forest muted into shades of gray. "What happened?" Callan asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "The forest remembers," Silvara replied cryptically, scanning their surroundings with sharp eyes. It reacts to disturbances. We were lucky the dome held. Lucky? Callan scoffed. Feels more like cursed. Her gaze flicked toward him, amused despite the gravity of their situation. Patience. Human. Survival isn't always pretty. As they ventured further, the terrain shifted dramatically. Dense foliage gave way to rocky outcrops covered in bioluminescent moss, and the air grew colder, tinged with an electric charge that raised the hairs on Callan's arms. Silvara moved with purpose, her steps measured and deliberate, while Callan struggled to keep up, his makeshift staff digging into the uneven ground. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the silence. Silvara froze, her weapon humming to life. From the shadows emerged a pack of creatures unlike anything Callan had encountered before. They resembled wolves, but their bodies shimmered with translucent scales, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Their movements were synchronized, predatory, circling them slowly. "Stay behind me," Silvara commanded, her voice calm but firm. Callan obeyed, gripping his staff tightly, though he doubted it would do much against these beasts. As the largest wolf lunged, Silvara fired her weapon, a beam of concentrated energy striking the creature squarely in the chest. It yelped and retreated, but the others advanced, emboldened by numbers. One beast leapt toward Callan, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Instinctively, he swung his staff, hitting it squarely on the snout. The wolf recoiled, giving Silvara enough time to dispatch it with another blast. The remaining wolves hesitated, then scattered into the underbrush, their growls fading into the distance. "Not bad," Silvara remarked, holstering her weapon. "For a human." Callan wiped sweat from his brow, his heart racing. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "Don't thank me yet," she said, pointing ahead. Through the mist, a towering structure loomed, a fortress carved into the mountainside, its spires reaching toward the sky. Lights flickered within its depths, casting an ethereal glow over the surrounding area. "What is that place?" Callan asked, awe mingling with apprehension. "Our destination," Silvara replied. "And possibly our salvation, or our doom." As they approached the fortress, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air thickened with an almost tangible sense of foreboding. Callan's unease grew with each step, but Silvara's determination propelled him forward. When they reached the massive gates, intricately adorned with symbols that pulsed faintly, Silvara placed her hand against the cold metal. The gates creaked open slowly, revealing a cavernous interior illuminated by floating orbs of light. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with history and secrets. Walls lined with ancient carvings depicted scenes of battles and rituals, each image imbued with a sense of power that resonated through the chamber. At the far end, a figure awaited them, a humanoid silhouette cloaked in shadow. "Silvara," the figure intoned, stepping into the light. It was a male, his features sharp and angular, his eyes a piercing shade of violet. "You've returned. And brought company," Silvara responded, gesturing toward Callan. "This is Callan Drake, a human." The man's eyebrows rose in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "How did a human come to be here?" "That's what we intend to find out," Silvara said, her tone challenging. "Kale, meet our guest. Callan, this is Kale, keeper of the archives." Kale studied Callan intently, his gaze dissecting every detail. A curious anomaly indeed. "Follow me." He led them through winding corridors, past chambers filled with artifacts and holographic displays chronicling the history of Silvara's people. Callan marveled at the technology and craftsmanship, each piece telling stories of civilizations long past. Finally, they entered a room dominated by a massive crystal suspended in mid-air, its facets refracting light into dazzling patterns. "This," Kale explained, "is the Nexus. It holds the collective knowledge of our ancestors. Perhaps it can shed light on your unexpected arrival." Silvara stepped forward, placing her hands on the crystal. Images began to swirl within its depths, forming a tapestry of events spanning millennia. Callan watched in stunned silence as visions of wars, migrations, and celestial phenomena unfolded before his eyes. Among them, he caught glimpses of Earth, ancient and modern, interwoven with threads of destiny linking his world to this one. "Do you see it?" Silvara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Callan nodded, realization dawning. "We're connected. Somehow someone, or something, brought me here deliberately." Kale's expression darkened. "Then the stakes are higher than we anticipated. If forces unknown seek to bridge our worlds, chaos may ensue." Callan felt a chill run down his spine. "What happens now?" "Now," Silvara said, turning to face him, her golden eyes ablaze with resolve, "we prepare for whatever comes next, for all our sakes." The weight of her words hung in the air, a promise of trials yet to come. Callan's mind raced as he absorbed the implications of what they'd just uncovered. The Nexus had revealed fragments of a grand design, threads connecting Earth to this alien world, woven together by forces far beyond his comprehension. But understanding wasn't enough. Preparation was key, and time was slipping through their fingers like sand. Silvara turned to Kale, her expression grim but resolute. "We need answers, not riddles. What do we know about these forces?" Kale hesitated, pacing slowly around the glowing crystal. His violet eyes flickered with unease, a rare crack in his otherwise stoic demeanor. Legends speak of an ancient entity known as the Arinder, a being that exists between worlds, manipulating destinies for reasons even our ancestors couldn't fathom. If it has chosen to act now, after millennia of silence, he trailed off, shaking his head, it does not bode well. Callan frowned, leaning heavily on his staff. So, some cosmic puppet master decided I'd make a good marionette? Great. Just great. It's not about you, Silvara snapped, though there was no malice in her tone, only urgency. You're a piece of a larger puzzle. The question is, why now? Before anyone could respond, the fortress trembled violently, sending shards of light scattering across the chamber. The floating orbs dimmed momentarily before flaring back to life, casting jagged shadows against the walls. A low, guttural growl echoed through the corridors outside, growing louder with each passing second. "They've found us," Kale said tersely, drawing a blade from his side. Unlike Silvara's sleek, organic weapon, his was forged from blackened steel etched with runes that shimmered faintly. The predators always follow the scent of power. "Stay close," Silvara ordered, grabbing Callan's arm and pulling him toward a narrow doorway at the far end of the room. "Kale, can you hold them off?" "I'll buy you time," Kale replied without hesitation, taking up position near the entrance. "But don't waste it." As Silvara dragged Callan into the passageway, the sounds of battle erupted behind them. Snarls, roars, and the clash of metal against claw. Callan glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of Kale standing firm amidst chaos, his blade cutting through shadowy forms that surged forward like waves crashing against a rock. "Who, or what are those things?" Callan panted as they sprinted down the corridor. "The Vorith," Silvara replied grimly. "Creatures born from the fractures between dimensions. They feed on instability, and right now, you're the biggest source of it." "Fantastic," Callan muttered under his breath. "Just when I thought today couldn't get worse." The hallway twisted and turned unpredictably, lit only by faint phosphorescent veins running along the walls. At one point, Silvara stopped abruptly, pressing her palm against a section of the wall that seemed indistinguishable from the rest. With a soft hum, a hidden door slid open, revealing a steep staircase spiraling downward into darkness. "In here," she urged, shoving him ahead of her. "Quickly." They descended rapidly, the air growing colder and damper with each step. Callan's legs burned with exertion, but he forced himself to keep moving, spurred on by the distant echoes of combat above. Finally, they reached the bottom, emerging into a cavernous chamber illuminated by a massive pool of liquid light at its center. The substance pulsed rhythmically, as if alive, radiating warmth that chased away the chill. "What is this place?" Callan asked, staring at the mesmerizing glow. "A sanctuary," Silvara explained, stepping closer to the pool. "And possibly our only chance of survival." She knelt beside the edge, dipping her fingers into the radiant liquid. It clung to her skin like molten silver, spreading intricate patterns across her hands and arms. She closed her eyes, murmuring softly in her melodic language. The light responded, rippling outward in concentric circles until the entire chamber vibrated with energy. Callan watched in awe, unsure whether to feel reassured or terrified. "What are you doing?" "Reaching out," she replied cryptically. "If the Arinder truly brought you here, then it must have left traces, a signature, a calling card. This pool connects to the fabric of reality itself. It might show us where to look next. And if it doesn't—" Her gaze met his, golden eyes gleaming with determination. "Then we improvise." As she continued her ritual, Callan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Something was happening, not just in the pool, but all around them. The very air seemed to thicken, charged with an electric tension that made his teeth ache. Above, the sounds of battle grew louder, closer, punctuated by the occasional crash of stone collapsing under the weight of unseen forces. Suddenly, the pool erupted in a blinding flash of light. Images began to form within its depths, fragmented scenes flashing too quickly to comprehend fully. Callan caught glimpses of Earth, of battles fought in deserts and cities, of faces both familiar and foreign. Then came visions of the alien world they stood on now. Towering spires, endless forests, and finally, a colossal structure perched atop a mountain peak, wreathed in storm clouds. "That's it," Silvara whispered, rising to her feet. "That's where we need to go." Before Callan could ask anything further, the ground shook violently, nearly knocking him off balance. Dust rained down from the ceiling as cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Somewhere above, Cale shouted something unintelligible, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps thundering down the stairs. "They're coming," Silvara said sharply, grabbing Callan's arm once more. "We have to move." Without waiting for a response, she led him toward a narrow tunnel branching off from the chamber. Behind them, the Vorath poured into the sanctuary, their grotesque forms silhouetted against the pulsing light of the pool. Their growls reverberated through the cavern, sending chills down Callan's spine. "Run!" Silvara commanded, pushing him ahead of her. They bolted into the tunnel, the darkness swallowing them whole. Callan stumbled blindly, guided only by the pressure of Silvara's hand on his arm. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, accompanied by the sickening scrape of claws against stone. For every step they took, the creatures seemed to gain too. Just as despair began to creep in, a faint glimmer of light appeared ahead. Silvara quickened her pace, dragging Callan along with her. They burst into another chamber, smaller than the last but no less breathtaking. In its center stood a pedestal topped with a crystalline shard that emitted a soft, soothing glow. "This way," Silvara called, racing toward the pedestal. Callan followed, adrenaline masking the pain in his battered body. As they reached the pedestal, Silvara placed her hands on the shard, closing her eyes as it began to hum. The light intensified, enveloping them in a cocoon of radiant energy. "What's happening?" Callan demanded, shielding his face from the brilliance. "We're leaving," Silvara replied, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Hold on." The last thing Callan saw before the world dissolved into light was the snarling maw of a Vorath lunging toward them, mere inches away. Then everything went white. When consciousness returned, Callan found himself sprawled on cold, hard ground. His body ached, though the sharp pains from earlier had dulled somewhat. Blinking against the brightness, he realized they were no longer underground but standing on a windswept plateau overlooking a vast expanse of jagged peaks and swirling mist. Silvara crouched nearby, inspecting her weapon while scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. Her armor bore fresh scorch marks, evidence of their recent escape. "Welcome to the spire," she said without looking at him. "Our final destination." Callan pushed himself upright, wincing as his muscles protested. "Final destination for what?" "For answers," she replied, rising to her full height. "And for whatever comes next." As they approached the towering structure looming ahead, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into the eye of the storm. Whatever awaited them inside the spire, it would change everything, for better or worse. The spire loomed above them, its crystalline surface refracting light into a kaleidoscope of colors. It was both beautiful and intimidating, a monument to an ancient power that seemed to hum with life. Callan felt small in its shadow, his human insignificance amplified by the sheer scale of the alien architecture. Yet, as he followed Silvara up the winding path leading to its entrance, he couldn't deny the flicker of hope stirring within him. If answers lay inside, then maybe, just maybe, they could fix this mess. As they reached the massive doors, etched with intricate patterns resembling constellations, Silvara paused. She placed her hands on the cold surface, murmuring something under her breath. The doors groaned open slowly, revealing a cavernous interior bathed in soft, golden light. The air smelled faintly of ozone, charged with energy that prickled against Callan's skin. Inside, the chamber stretched high into the heavens, supported by towering pillars carved from translucent stone. At the center stood another artifact, a floating crystal orb much like the one in the fortress, but larger, more radiant. It pulsed rhythmically, as if breathing. "This is it," Silvara said, her voice tinged with awe. "The heart of the Irinder." Callan stared at the orb, mesmerized. "So, what now?" "We ask politely for a way home." Silvara gave him a wry smile. "Not exactly. But we'll need your help." "My help?" Callan frowned. "What can I possibly do?" "You're here for a reason," she replied, stepping closer to the orb. "Whatever force brought you across worlds did so because you have a role to play. Maybe not as a warrior or a leader, but as someone who sees things differently. Trust me when I say that perspective matters." Before Callan could respond, the orb flared brightly, casting sharp shadows across the room. A deep, resonant voice filled the space, not from any single source, but everywhere at once. "Why have you come?" Callan froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Beside him, Silvara straightened, her expression unreadable but determined. "We seek understanding," she called out. "And balance. The human standing beside me is proof of interference, a ripple in the fabric of existence. Explain yourself." For a long moment, there was silence. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time, almost contemplative. "He carries potential, not just for destruction, but for unity. His presence bridges worlds divided by fear and ignorance. Through him, paths converge." Callan blinked, overwhelmed. "Unity? What does that even mean? I'm just me." The orb shimmered, projecting images into the air around them. Scenes of Earth and the alien world intertwined, humans and Valerii working side by side, forging alliances, building peace. It was a vision of harmony that seemed impossible, and yet undeniably hopeful. "You are more than just you," the voice intoned. "You are a catalyst. A choice must be made: return to your world, severing the connection, or embrace this bond and become a bridge between realms." Callan turned to Silvara, searching her face for guidance. Her golden eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "It's your decision," she said quietly. "But know this, whatever you choose, I'll stand with you." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time since arriving on this strange planet, Callan felt a sense of clarity. He stepped forward, addressing the orb directly. "I don't fully understand what's happening here," he began, his voice firm despite his uncertainty. "But I know one thing: running away won't solve anything. If there's a chance to bring our worlds together, to stop living in fear of each other, then I want to try." The orb pulsed brighter, bathing the chamber in warm light. The voice returned, gentler now. "Then so shall it be. The link will remain, strengthened by your resolve. Go forth, catalyst, and forge a new path." With that, the orb dimmed, its glow fading until only the faint hum of energy remained. Callan exhaled deeply, feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Well," he said, turning to Silvara with a tentative grin. "Guess I'm sticking around for a while." She smirked, crossing her arms. "Don't get too comfortable, human. You've still got a lot to learn." Over the following weeks, Callan immersed himself in the alien world, guided by Silvara and Kale, who had miraculously survived their encounter with the Vorath. Together, they worked to establish communication channels between Earth and the Valerii, laying the groundwork for cooperation rather than conflict. It wasn't easy. There were misunderstandings, skepticism, and moments of doubt, but every step forward felt like progress. One evening, as the twin suns set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Callan found himself standing beside Silvara atop a ridge overlooking the forest where they'd first met. The trees glowed softly, their luminescent veins pulsing in sync with the stars above. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd end up here. Fighting alongside aliens, bridging worlds. It's insane." Silvara chuckled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Insanity often leads to greatness." Callan glanced at her, noting the subtle warmth in her expression. "Thanks for not leaving me behind back then." She looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "You wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes without me." He laughed, shaking his head. "True enough." They stood there for a while longer, watching the sky shift through shades of twilight. In that moment, Callan realized he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving. He had found purpose, friendship, and perhaps even something more. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, he knew they'd face them together. As the first stars appeared, twinkling like promises in the vast expanse, Callan felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he belonged, not just to one world, but to two. And that was a future worth fighting for.